Mohegan Sun Arena today and saw AEW Collision, and definitely was a very strong show tonight. And before I start my review, I want to talk about the pros and cons of both the show and Mohegan Sun. First of all, for the show, I felt that there was way too many matches, and they ultimately had way too many jobber matches. And I also just think that at the very end of the show, a lot of people really wanted to see Kenny Omega and MJF have their match and have a good amount of time in it. So it almost felt like if they gave the Kenny Omega and MJF match like an hour, it would have been better, or 45 minutes, not just half an hour. Like, they could have just like trimmed the fat a little bit. One of the big issues with AEW is that, they have ROH on the weekend. Like, they have a couple of ROH dark matches, and then they also have a couple of ROH matches after the show. There was nothing that really interests me, and there is no like people getting on the microphone and saying, you know what, I want to have a match at Full Gear, or I want to have a match on regular television. So it's almost like, what's the purpose of ROH? And then when I looked at the AEW shows online, looks like they have like two final battle events or two ROH pay-per-view events. So it's not good when you are not announcing those things or incorporating that, because they need to hype those things more and more. For Mohegan Sun, it's a very beautiful arena, and a lot of beautiful architecture, and also they have a lot of great restaurants and food. And also, like, the other thing too is that if they ever run out of food in the arena, you can always go to the casino and get something before or after. And then also, if you like gambling or just having some fun, there's a lot of activities. Some cons of it is that if you go to Mohegan Sun Arena, I was a little mad with what happened to me. That I had a wallet that had like a chain on it, because I always have to kind of connect it to my pants. They made me throw that out, the chain part of my wallet, and I was kind of like mad because they said, like, you can swing it around like a weapon, and I felt that was kind of like, a little bullshit. During the dark match, there were two matches that stood out to me. First of all, Leela Hirsch. I believe she's a Russian wrestler, and one thing is that I saw like her video package, like her promo videos, and it shows like her exercising and being like this athlete. So I was saying to myself, they can kind of put her into like a Rocky type of role, where she's kind of like this underdog, and she kind of is a little inspired by Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle, like this very powerful athletic woman, but always like kind of losing. And then once in a blue moon she actually wins, or she has like a losing streak and then wins. I think there's something that can kind of be done with that, because I think that you can kind of show her as a very determined and very serious woman, and I think that would be a good role for her. I think that would be a good storyline. And then the next match that that was a dark match with Max Seidel and Christopher Daniels versus the Righteous. So I felt a little bad for the Righteous, because they're kind of almost in the Powerhouse Hobbs role, where with Powerhouse Hobbs, he always was featured in dark matches for a couple of months, and now they have him in the Don Callis family, which is good for him, because he should be in factions and with people that can make him mean a lot more. With the Righteous, I do think that I'm very concerned that they're kind of in the Hobbs role, where they don't know what to do with them. So they may just be in dark matches from now on, or for a couple months until they call them up to the main roster. But I think with the Righteous, what I would say is that the Trios title has a babyface champion, the tag team has a heel champion, and then with MJF and Adam Cole, because MJF goes between heel and babyface. He's babyface now, but you don't want somebody that's kind of like a mix. You want to like have him. You want to have the Righteous face a clear babyface team, because they're heels. So I would say that they should face the Acclaimed at one time, and then also they can find a third member. But I do not want to see them get underutilized. There's a lot that they can accomplish. So it opens with Jay White versus AR Fox, and this was kind of like a typical AR Fox match, where AR Fox was doing a lot of offensive and flippy moves. And then Jay White's more of a counter wrestler. Like, there'll be moves where he almost gets hit. He would know how to grab AR Fox and do more counter moves. And I also don't see, and also like one thing I like about Jay White is that he's not really a flippy wrestler or anything like that. So it's good just not to have that. He was more of like, as I said, he's good at counters and he's good at brawling. And the Bullet Club Gold are very good at hyping the audience. They did a really great job. So I don't see a lot of Jay White talking, and I don't see a lot of Jay White like just doing things to really get him over. Like he could be like more like a Randy Orton, but he doesn't transcend and how despicable his character is. I think like you kind of look at Juice Robinson kind of in that role really, but I do think that there's a lot more that he could do. But obviously, when I watched this match, there are two things that also bothered me. That I think that one thing that wasn't good with this match is that you're having AR Fox as Jay White's opponent. Like obviously, if Jay White's gonna be a contender for a heavyweight title, he should be facing like maybe a John Moxley, maybe a Kenny Omega, maybe a Bryan Danielson, like actually somebody who's up there, or a former ROH champion, not AR Fox, because what has AR Fox done or accomplished? Him getting two falls on Jay White, it just looks really, really bad. It should have been more of a squash match, but it really wasn't. It was kind of more like 50-50, but at the end of the day, Jay White has to win, so I felt that that wasn't appropriate. And then after that, you had the first jobber match, which is the Guns versus the Boys. I feel bad for Dalton Castle, because he should be treated like a bigger deal. And I think that AEW knows that there's a lot of people that like Dalton Castle, but he's definitely in the jobber role. And even with the boys that he hangs out with, they're in the jobber role. So I felt that that's not good, but obviously that's a way for him to kind of get some exposure on television. Once again, I really appreciate this match, because obviously you're trying to make the Guns a big deal. It's going to be the Guns versus MJF, or the Guns versus MJF and Samoa Joe. So you need to give the Guns a match to really, really get them to really emphasize that they are important. So I like what they're doing. So it's like you have wrestlers that are part of a bigger story that leads to a blow off at a pay-per-view. The wrestlers that they're pushing are actually people that know how to get over with the audience, and they know how to have good matches, and they also know how to have jobber matches. And even though there may be some oversaturation or too many matches on the card, that's really what they should be doing, and that's good professional wrestling. And WWE used to be a master of that. It's not just having good matches, it's having stories and characters mean something. So when they have the matches, you're getting behind a character, not getting behind just two people and them having a match, because it honestly feels like you're playing a video game if you do that. So the next match was Abaddon versus Shida. So I was very happy that this was a hardcore match. And honestly, it did kind of upset me in a way, because they didn't advertise this as a hardcore match. If they do another match where Shida versus another wrestler during Christmas, and they're gonna have a Christmas themed match or whatever, like a Miracle on 34th Street Street Fight in WWE, they're gonna have something like that. Please just let the audience know, let people know, because those things are always interesting and unique. That will draw eyes to the product. Advertise those things. The pacing was so shitty in this match that I think Abaddon, that if they were more just into just hitting each other, doing their choreography and doing their spots a lot quicker, it would have been a better match. It just felt like they were trying to stall time, and I think that a lot of people can kind of see that. I also really appreciate what Abaddon did. She kind of had like this Mad Max meets Beetlejuice, Mad Maxine meets Beetlejuice type of look. So she should always be doing that. And I also kind of like, she's almost like Jade Cargill in a way, where Jade Cargill is not just a model, she's a cosplayer. So it's always good when wrestlers really expand within that. Another bad thing about this match is that they didn't have any monitors on, because Abaddon pours out, I think, candy in the ring. Some people thought it was Legos or something like that, and they didn't show. And if they had something like actual hard candy, and they did a spot into hard candy, that would have been better. Not just something that looks like taffy, like taffies or whatever. And then also you have monitors, you have the screen in the front of the arena, so they always have to be turning those things on, because sometimes you don't see shit. And sometimes you want to emphasize a spot where somebody's going into a pumpkin, somebody's going into candy, somebody's going into a special foreign object. you have to show that to the audience that's watching the show. You can't just kind of be like, well, if it's out of your sight, we don't care, because AEW does that a lot, and a lot of people say that that's not okay. Samoa Joe, and this was a jobber match. So, it was just kind of getting Samoa Joe over. And I understand that they're trying to get Samoa Joe over because you don't know if it's going to be Samoa Joe and MJF versus the Gun Club. And Samoa Joe wants to go after the title again. So maybe he gets another shot at the World's End, the Nassau Coliseum show at the end of December. So I do think that that's why he had the match. I mean, I would say it's like your third jobber match, because Jay White versus AR Fox should have been a jobber match. The Guns versus the Boys was more of a jobber match. This is kind of more of a jobber match. So now you had 4 matches, and I think they rushed through the last three of them, and then the MJF and Kenny Omega, they gave it time. The next match they had was Ricky Starks versus Dax Harwood. So I got a little thrown off because I think somebody said it was a tag team championship match, and I also got thrown off too because usually when they have matches like this with 2 people that just fought each other for a championship and won, usually they would not have another match where it's like 1 versus 1. So I wish they kind of made that more clear. So I was a little lost, but I was not wanting to see this match because I was kind of like, I was very hyped for the Kenny Omega versus MJF match. I think a lot of people felt that way, like, oh man, it's like 9 o'clock and now there's this match and a couple of more matches. The next match was Cesaro versus a Cesaro jobber match. Once again, if you have too many jobber matches, it gets very monotonous, especially 4 in a night. So there's a couple of things I want to say about MJF and Kenny Omega. They are great wrestlers, no matter what people say. Even what foul mouth, don't fuck with my Wendy's Jim Cornette says. They know how to do moves. They know how to hype an audience. Even though there's some like goofiness in some of their matches and comic relief, they do a really, really great job. There was the kind of like maybe this metaphor of passing of Kenny Omega testing MJF and passing the torch, because obviously there are wrestlers like Kenny Omega who are approaching 40, have wrestled a long time, so it is kind of like, the young lion, like the old lion preparing the young lion. When it comes to these matches, that I really appreciate what MJF said, that he does not believe in doing hardcore matches all the time, but also in addition, he does not believe in having matches all the time, because if he wrestled like this every single show, it would get boring and monotonous. So when you see MJF just doing a lot of like different spots, especially like these Hurricane Rana types of counters, it's very surprising because he's not a wrestler that's known for being a high flyer or being very like flippy or luchador style, because that's a very luchador style move. Anything that's like a Hurricane Rana, when he does that very rarely, it feels a lot more special. But if somebody's always like doing that all the time, it's not as special. It's like what Otira Central was saying about Wardlow. Like Wardlow can do the Swanton Bomb, and that looks very special for a big man to do that. But if Wardlow was doing that every single time, but Wardlow does that a lot. But if he did that on the Wembley show, that would be a lot better than doing that all the time. So I really appreciate how MJF has an ability to wrestle a more athletic and more luchador and more like, more kind of like high spot and flippy spot type of match very, very rarely and at the right time. He doesn't kind of like show all of his arsenal, and that's actually really, really good, because that makes you a better wrestler that way, because if you always do that, you're kind of just making nothing really special. I also kind of appreciate that they're both masters of storytellers, and I also think that they both just knew how to kind of get the audience to kind of get really, really hyped. So they kind of just did what they were good at very well, and they really excelled with this. There's 2 other things that were kind of questionable. Like they did a table spot, and I didn't like the table spot, because the problem is that if you were having a championship match and somebody pulls out a table and they both go through the table in WWE or other places, that would either be a no contest or that would be a disqualification for the person initiating the move. Or if somebody goes through the table but somebody pulls it out, they may be like, okay, well now that's a disqualification because that other person introduced a foreign object which later got used even if it was unintentional. So they have to learn to not have matches that are not that are not hardcore stipulations and throw somebody through a table or bring out a table, because it's just like, what's the rule with tables in regular matches in AEW? It seems like you can just do a table spot or bring out a table and you don't get disqualified for it in AEW, or put something through an announcer table when in normal wrestling matches you get disqualified. You don't introduce foreign objects into a match that doesn't allow it. Weird when Kenny Omega brings out a table, the referee does nothing about it, but then the referee is mad that he's removing the cushions from the barricade because he wants to give MJF a power bomb onto the barricade. So it just doesn't. That's not good. That they shouldn't have had Don Callis come down, because the problem was that Don Callis really didn't do anything except just kind of like swerve the audience twice. Like, we thought that he was gonna screw Kenny Omega, or he was gonna bring down his people to mess up the match. He was ultimately there to kind of be like, oh, you think that this match is gonna get screwy, but we're not gonna screw you. So I kind of just didn't like that, because I felt that that's kind of like overdone in AEW, where they're teasing a match being messed up, but it doesn't get messed up. So I don't think that that was necessary. And I also think that maybe this match kind of needed Don Callis and the Don Callis family to mess it up, or the Guns to mess it up with Jay White, because I think if you did that, a lot of people in Connecticut would be booing and trashing and throwing like their drinks or whatever, and it would give the wrestlers who did that nuclear heat, and that would lead into Full Gear. But that would also kind of set up Kenny Omega versus MJF too, because they just had a match that kind of got screwed up, really. So I felt that that would have been stronger. But definitely, the other thing that I would say is that it's controversial. I think that would have been stronger, but I also think that it's good that they don't do that, because it subverts expectation. Because I know, like, what happens in TNA a lot, that they always, and WCW a lot, is they always have matches, like a majority of their matches have what they call Vince Russo finish, where you have so many people come out and kind of mess up everything. And if you always overdo it, or sometimes the match is so good and people are into it, sometimes you have to call an audible and say, we're not going to do that, we're just going to have the match go to its conclusion. Sometimes you need the match to be messed up to tell the story, and sometimes you don't need the match messed up to tell a story. And sometimes you can change things on the fly to change something, or to keep something the same. The match not go to the Don Callis family fucking it up, or Bullet Club Gang not fucking it up. I think that that's very, very helpful, because you want to send people home happy. But I also think that sometimes AEW should have some endings of the show where it upsets people or pisses people off, because like I've said, imagine if the Gun Club fucked that match up. I would imagine a lot of people in the Mohegan Sun throwing drinks or throwing food or whatever, and I think that would have been necessary to make the Full Gear match a big deal, because then people would have wanted to kill them at the pay-per-view, and then they would have watched that vicariously through MJF and other people. So I do think it's a very interesting show. And I also will say that I really appreciate how they're setting up things for the future AEW events, for Dynamite and Collision, but also setting up storylines where it's going to lead to matches for Full Gear. So it looks like a lot of really great stuff, and I'm very, very happy to see where they're going with this. So overall, really great night. I'm happy that I went, and it was definitely worth